In a world ruled by scent, she was born a ghost. To every wolf in the northern packs, Ilara was invisible. No scent meant no mate, no pack, no destiny. She survived alone in the silent snow until the night the Alpha King, whose hearing could trace a single heartbeat across a mountain range, heard a rhythm that mirrored his own. In the rigid hierarchy of the packs, scent is everything. It dictates status, loyalty, and love. To be without it isn't just a disability, it's a sentence to a life of absolute solitude. For 22 years, Ilara lived as a phantom in her own world. But when the most powerful wolf alive hears a heartbeat no one else can, it poses a dangerous question. What if the entire foundation of their society is wrong? Ilara's condition had a clinical name, anosmia lupus. In the century since it was first documented, only 17 cases had been confirmed. Of those, 16 individuals had disappeared into the wilderness, presumed dead by their own paw or by the harsh elements. The 17th was Ilara. Her parents, mid-ranking hunters in the Ironwood Pack, died defending their border from rogues when she was a child. Their scent, strong and loyal, faded from her memory within hours, leaving her truly alone. The pack cared for her out of duty, but to them she was a void, a walking silence in a world of constant olfactory noise. They housed her in a disused watchman's hut on the very edge of their territory, where the pine forests of Washington state gave way to the raw, snow-capped peaks of the Cascade Range. Her existence was one of eerie quiet. She couldn't smell the fear of prey, the warning pheromones of a challenged wolf, or the comforting scent of the pack hearth. Conversely, no wolf could find her by tracking her spoor. If she walked into a blizzard, she left no trail. If she hid, she was utterly undetectable. This made her a useful, if unsettling, asset. The current Ironwood Alpha, a pragmatic and cold man named Boren, used her as a courier for sensitive messages between allied packs. Who would suspect the ghost girl, carrying secrets in her satchel, moving unseen through contested forests? But her utility came with a price: profound isolation. At the monthly pack runs, she was ignored. During the mating ceremonies, she was a spectator to a ritual she could never partake in. Her world was built on observations of body language, the tremor in a voice, the shifting of weight, clues everyone else ignored because they had the truth of scent. She learned to read the minute dilation of pupils that signaled aggression, the subtle tension in shoulders that betrayed a lie. While others smelled emotion, she saw it. This was Ilara's life for 22 years, a study in silent endurance, but the pack's politics were shifting. Boren, hungry for more territory and prestige, was negotiating a bold alliance with the powerful Silver Fang pack to the south. The deal hinged on the mating of his son, Kale, to the Silver Fang Alpha's daughter. It was a classic power play, a merger built on scent compatibility reports and political gain. The concept of a fated mate, a bond written in the stars and confirmed by an irresistible, unique scent, was still sacred. But for alphas like Boren, it was a luxury often sacrificed on the altar of expansion. The announcement was made at the winter solstice gathering. Ilara, as usual, was tasked with serving the ceremonial mulled wine, moving like a shadow between the roaring fire and the celebrating wolves. She felt the joy in the room as a physical vibration, heard the laughter, saw the embraces. But to the pack, she was part of the scenery, until Kale, Boren's son, drunkenly stumbled into her path. He was a handsome wolf with a cruel streak, emboldened by his future status. The air around him was thick with the cloying scent of pine liquor and arrogance, a scent Ilara could only imagine. "Watch it, ghost," he slurred, his eyes struggling to focus on her. His friends chuckled. "Or what? You'll tell my father, he can't smell you either." The laughter grew. One of his companions, a beater named JX, sneered. "It's unnatural. How do we even know she's truly one of us? No scent, no mate. Maybe she's not a wolf at all. Maybe she's something else." The comment hung in the cold air, more dangerous than a threat. In a world defined by scent, questioning someone's very nature was the first step toward exile or worse. Ilara lowered her gaze, the practiced submission, and moved to step away, but Kale blocked her path. "Jayek has a point," he mused, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper for his audience. "If you have no scent, you have no place in the natural order. You're a glitch, a mistake the moon goddess forgot to correct." He reached out not to strike her, but to wave his hand in front of her face, as if dispelling a faint mist. "You don't belong here, ghost. Once my alliance is sealed, I think we'll clean house." The threat was clear. The new regime would have no use for a scentless courier. Her protected, if lonely, existence was about to be revoked. That night, back in her freezing hut, Ilara made a decision. She would not wait for banishment. She would leave. She knew the mountains better than any scout, precisely because she navigated by sight and memory, not smell. She would disappear into the highest, most remote pass, a place even the hardiest wolves avoided, and live or die on her own terms. As she packed her meager belongings, a knife, a tinderbox, a worn blanket, she felt not fear but a grim resolve. She was choosing her own silence over their imposed one. Meanwhile, 300 miles to the northeast, in a fortified compound built into the cliffs of the Canadian Rockies, a different kind of isolation was being contemplated. Cashen, the Alpha King, stood on his observation deck, listening to the vastness of his domain. His title was not ceremonial. He had earned it through sheer, brutal dominance, uniting the fractious northern territories under one banner. His rule was absolute, but it was also lonely. His heightened hearing was a legend. It was said he could hear a squirrel's heartbeat from a mile away, discern a lie from the infinitesimal catch in a breath, and track a rogue by the unique rhythm of its gait through snow. But this gift was also a curse. The world was never quiet. It was a cacophony of pulses, breaths, and whispers, a relentless symphony of life that offered no peace. He had never found his fated mate. He had smelled every eligible female from every allied and rival pack. Their scents of jasmine, snowberry, cedar, and iron were all pleasant, all powerful, but none triggered the earth-shattering recognition the old Thales spoke of. He had begun to believe the stories were just that, stories, that the true destined bond was a myth perpetuated to give meaning to political matches. His council urged him to choose a queen for stability, to secure an heir. But Cashen, the wolf who could hear the truth in everything, refused to live a lie. The pressure, however, was mounting. A coalition of southern alphas, led by the ambitious Boran of Ironwood, was gaining strength, challenging his trade edicts. They mocked his solitary reign, calling him the Baron King. A political marriage would silence them, but it would also mean surrendering the last hope for something real. On the same night Ilara decided to flee, Cashen was poring over maps and alliance requests, his senses overloaded with the frantic, anxious heartbeats of his advisors. He needed silence. He needed to not hear for just a few hours. He dismissed everyone and walked out into the sub-zero night, climbing to the highest peak above his compound. He closed his eyes, letting the howling wind fill his ears, trying to drown out the world below. And then he heard it, fainter than a whisper, more subtle than the memory of sound, a heartbeat. It was impossibly distant, threading its way through the mountain ranges, carried on some freak atmospheric current. It was slow, steady, and resilient, beating against a backdrop of utter sonic void. No accompanying breath, no rustle of movement, just a pure, solitary rhythm. And as he focused on it, attuning his entire being to that faint pulse, his own heart stuttered, then fell into perfect, synchronous time with it. Thump, 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 a mirror, a match. His eyes flew open, glowing gold in the darkness. It was impossible. No heartbeat could carry that far, no wolf could be that silent. Yet the proof was thrumming in his own chest. The Baron King was not barren, his mate was alive, and she was somewhere in the deadly, trackless expanse of the Cascade Mountains, completely, utterly silent to the world. But now he was listening. Cashen did not hesitate. He turned from the cliff edge and roared, a sound of pure command that shattered the quiet of his compound and brought every wolf within a 5-mile radius to instant, trembling attention. Within minutes, his war room was chaos. Maps of the Cascade Range were unfurled across a massive table. His lead tracker, a grizzled veteran named Wren, stared at the marked area, a 200-mile radius of brutal, snow-choked wilderness. You heard a heartbeat from here. My king, with respect, that's not possible. The atmospheric conditions, the distance, it defies every law of our physiology. Cashen's amber eyes glowed. I don't care about laws, I heard her. Her heart beats in time with mine. Find the silence within that region. Find where a wolf leaves no trace. The order was unprecedented. They weren't tracking a scent, they were searching for an absence, a void. They dispatched scouts with orders to report any anomaly, a trail that vanished, game that was killed but not eaten, a place where the natural sounds of the forest seemed muted. Cashen's second, a fierce female beater named Lyra, voiced the tactical concern. Sire, mobilizing our forces for a search this vague will be seen as a provocation. Boran's Ironwood pack claims the southern Cascades. If our wolves cross into his territory without cause, it will be seen as an act of war. Cashen's smile was razor-thin. Then we have cause. Tell the messengers to inform every alpha from here to the coast. The king is searching for his fated mate. Any pack that interferes, hides her, or harms her will be considered in open rebellion. Their territories will be forfeit. The declaration was a seismic event in their world. The Baron King had a mate. The news spread through the supernatural grapevine faster than any scout could run, carried on the wind and whispered in frightened tones. In some quarters, it was met with awe. In others, like the whole of the Ironwood pack, it was met with derision and panic. Boren slammed his fist on his own table when the message arrived. A mate, now, he hears a heartbeat across mountains. This is a ruse, a pretext to invade my lands before my alliance with Silver Fang is sealed. His son Kale paled. The ghost girl had fled just days before. A coincidence? Impossible. She was scentless. No bond could form without scent. It was a biological impossibility. Yet a cold dread settled in his gut. Father, Kale said, choosing his words carefully. The scentless one, Ilara, she disappeared into the high pass. What if? Boren rounded on him. What if nothing? She is a ghost, a non-entity. Cashin is chasing an echo, and I will not let him use this fantasy to undermine me. But Boren was a strategist. He saw the threat. If Cashin was searching his territory, he needed a countermove. He sent his own scouts with different orders. Find the scentless girl first. Do not let the king's men take her. If you find her, you bring her to me, alive. But if that proves impossible, ensure she cannot be found. The unspoken order hung in the air. A dead ghost was less trouble than a living queen. The race was on. Ilara, meanwhile, was fighting a more immediate battle, survival. The high pass was a tomb of white. She moved by memory, following rock formations she'd studied from a distance. The cold was a biting, constant enemy. Without a pack to share warmth, without the metabolic surge that came from a mate bond or even pack closeness, she burned energy at a terrifying rate. She caught rabbits using simple snares, eating the meat raw and using the fur for insulation. She was a specter in the snow, but she was not alone. She felt the gaze of predators. A mountain lion stalked her for a day, confused by the lack of scent, eventually slinking away. The real danger she knew would be other wolves. On the third night, huddled in a shallow cave, she heard them, howls distant but distinct, not the unified song of a pack run, but the sharp, scanning calls of scouts. They were searching. For her, it seemed impossible, yet the calls came from both the east and the west. Ironwood from the west, an unfamiliar, deeper timbre from the east. She was in a narrowing corridor. She had to move higher, into a place even scouts would fear to go, the shattered glacier, a labyrinth of crevasses and unstable ice. It was suicide, but staying put was capture or death. She chose the glacier. Back at his command post, Cashin was a storm of contained fury. His scouts were reporting back, frustrated. Nothing, my king. We've swept the valleys. No missing persons, no reports of a lone wolf. It's as if she doesn't exist. Cashin paced, listening to the discordant, anxious heartbeats of his men. He was missing something. He closed his eyes, filtering out the noise, reaching for that faint, synced rhythm. It was still there, a faint thread, but weaker, fainter, slowing. A cold fear, sharper than any he'd felt in battle, lanced through him. She was fadding. She was in trouble. She's not in the valleys, he said, his eyes snapping open. You're searching where a wolf would go. She wouldn't. If she's lived unseen her whole life, she'd go where no wolf thinks to tread. The high places, the death zones. Ren looked aghast. The shattered glacier, no one survives there, not alone. She's not no one, Cashin snarled. She is my queen, and she is there. I can hear her heart straining. He made a decision that broke every protocol. Ready the helicopter, Lyra stared. The human machine, sire, the exposure risk. We are past risk. Now, it was a desperate move. Using human technology was frowned upon, a sign of weakness, but speed was now the only currency that mattered. As Cashin's borrowed human helicopter clattered toward the glacier, Ilara was facing her end. A misstep on a snow bridge sent her plunging 10 feet into a crevasse. The fall knocked the wind from her, and a sharp pain shot through her ankle, trapped in a blue ice tomb with the temperature plummeting. She tried to climb, but the walls were sheer. She was hidden utterly, and she was going to die here. The irony was not lost on her. She had spent her life invisible. Now she would die invisible. One thing she had never felt before, a desperate, lonely longing crashed over her, not for a pack but for a connection, for someone, anyone to know she was here. As her body temperature dropped, her heart began to slow, its rhythm growing heavy and labored. At that exact moment, in the vibrating cabin of the helicopter, Cashin gasped, his hand flying to his own chest. The syncopated rhythm was gone, replaced by a slow, faltering drumbeat of distress. Faster, he roared at the human pilot. She's dying. The helicopter set down on a stable ledge a mile from the crevasse field. Cashin shifted before the skids touched snow, a massive obsidian-furred wolf exploding from the cabin and into the blizzard. His hearing was a navigational array, cutting through the howling wind, discarding the crunch of ice and the pilot's fadding heartbeat. He was listening for silence, for the void where her heartbeat was a struggling beacon. He found it, a pocket of unnatural quiet, and within it, a faint, fadding thump. He bounded across ice bridges that groaned under his weight, his claws finding purchase where no other wolf would dare. He followed the sound to a narrow crack in the world. Without a second thought, he shifted back to human form, tied a climbing rope from his pack around his waist, and descended into the dark. The cold was apocalyptic, and there, curled in a ball, her skin nearly blue, was Ilara. She looked up as his form blocked the light, her silver eyes wide, not with fear, but with a profound, weary confusion. He dropped beside her, stripping off his thermal jacket and wrapping it around her, pulling her against the furnace of his own body. The moment they touched, two things happened simultaneously. For Ilara, a shockwave of sensation, not scent, but a resonant warmth, a feeling of homecoming so deep it felt like bones clicking into place. For Cashin, the world went utterly, blissfully silent. The cacophony of 1,000 heartbeats, breaths, and miles of rustling life simply vanished. For the first time in his memory, he heard perfect quiet, and in its center only one sound, the strong, steady, synchronized beating of their two hearts as one. "I found you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. She couldn't speak, but her hand weakly fisted in his shirt. He had her. But as he radioed for extraction, his sensitive ears, now focused only on her, picked up another sound, the crunch of snow, the controlled breath of wolves holding position. Above them, at the crevasse rim, silhouetted against the gray sky, stood Kale and 3 Ironwood enforcers. Kale's rifle was pointed not at Cashin, but at Ilara. "Step away from the ghost, King," Kale shouted, his voice tinged with desperate triumph. "She's a defective pack reject. You can't seriously believe this is your mate. Hand her over, this doesn't have to end in war." Cashin gently laid Ilara down, rising to his full height, placing his body as a shield. His own beast surged to the surface, a growl building that made the ice walls tremble. "You point a weapon at my queen," Cashin said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that carried with unnatural clarity. "You have already chosen war." The standoff in the crevasse lasted less than 10 seconds. Cashin moved faster than the eye could track. He didn't go for the gun. He went for the ice. A single, focused punch from his shifted fist into the crevasse wall above Kale created a fracture. A shelf of ice the size of a car broke free, collapsing between Kale and the edge, forcing the Ironwood heir and his men to scramble backward to avoid being buried. In that moment of chaos, Cashin secured the climbing rope around Ilara, radioed a code word to Lyra in the helicopter, and was hauled up with his mate in his arms. They rose from the blue gloom just as Kale was firing wild, useless shots into the falling snow. The helicopter banked away, leaving the Ironwood wolves stranded on the deadly glacier. Ilara, wrapped in thermal blankets and slowly warming against Cashin's chest, was only half conscious, but she was alive. And Cashin's world was finally perfectly quiet. He could hear the pilot's heartbeat, the rotors, the wind, but they were distant, manageable. Her heart against his ear was the only sound that mattered. The silence she gave him was the greatest gift he had ever received, but the battle was just beginning. Boran, upon hearing his son's furious satellite call, didn't despair. He saw opportunity. He immediately sent a formal accusation to the Werewolf Council, a governing body of ancient alphas that rarely intervened but held ultimate authority. His claim was explosive. King Cashin had used forbidden human technology to invade Ironwood territory. He had attacked a pack heir without provocation, and he was attempting to legitimize a mating bond with a scentless, genetically defective female, a violation of the most sacred biological laws of their kind. This was no longer a border skirmish. It was a challenge to the very natural order. The council, intrigued and concerned, summoned Cashin to conclave. He would have to present his mate and prove the bond before the oldest, most traditional wolves on the continent. If he failed, they could strip his title, dissolve his territories, and sanction his execution. Cashin's compound became a fortress under siege, not by enemies, but by doubt. His own advisors, while loyal, were uneasy. Lyra voiced the concern everyone felt. "My king, the bond is supposed to be confirmed by scent. It's the universal proof. The council will demand to smell her. They will demand to smell the bond. What do we show them?" Cashin, never taking his eyes off Ilara, who slept in the medical wing, answered softly, "We show them the truth." Ilara's recovery was slow. The frostbite was minimal, thanks to Cashin's swift rescue, but the psychological thaw took longer. Waking in a luxurious room, surrounded by attentive medics whose sense she could only imagine, was overwhelming. Cashin was a constant presence. He didn't speak much. Instead, he listened. He would sit beside her bed, close his eyes, and just breathe, a look of profound peace on his face. She learned that her silence soothed him. It was the first time her condition had ever been a gift to anyone. "They say we have to prove we are mates," she said quietly on the third day, her voice hoarse from disuse. "How I can't give you that scent." Cashin took her hand, placing it over his heart. "Do you feel that?" She did, a strong, steady rhythm. Then she became aware of her own. They were beating in perfect unison, not just similar but identical, as if one heart drove the other. "They want scent," Cashin said. "You will give them rhythm. We will give them proof they cannot argue with." But preparing for the council was like preparing for a trial. They coached her on protocol, on the history of the conclave, on the names and biases of the 12 sitting alphas. All were centuries old, all bound by tradition. The night before they were to leave, a new report arrived from Ren, the tracker. His team had been quietly investigating Ilara's past, her parents, the mystery of her condition. What he found changed everything. Her parents weren't just border guards, Ren said, his face grim in Cashin's study. Their deaths weren't random. They were targeted by a rogue faction that had been hired. "We tracked down the sole surviving rogue, rotting in a timber-packed jail. He talked before he died. The hit was ordered because her mother was a researcher. She had discovered something about the so-called scentless gene. She believed it wasn't a defect at all." Cashin leaned forward. "What was it?" "A mutation, a leap. She theorized it was the next step in our evolution. That as the world gets noisier, more polluted with human scents and chemicals, the ability to be silent, to connect on a deeper, non-chemical level, would become vital. She believed her daughter was the first of a new kind. The rogues were hired to silence the research and the proof, Ilara." Cashin stared at the documents, a cold fury building. Boren's pack had been adjacent to the rogue activity. He must have known. He had been hiding the truth, keeping Ilara as a useful secret, afraid of what her existence meant. This wasn't just about territory, it was about controlling the narrative of their species' future. Ilara was not a mistake, she was a revolution, and Cashin was about to present that revolution to the most conservative institution in their world. The council conclave was held in a stone amphitheater built into a remote Montana mountainside. No technology was allowed, only wolves, scent, and power. The 12 council alphas sat on stone thrones, their combined aura so potent it made the air thick and heavy. Boren was there, smug and confident, with a subdued Kale at his side. Cashin entered with Ilara. She wore a simple grey dress, her pale hair a stark contrast. She walked with her head high, but Cashin could feel the tremor in her hand through their linked arms. The moment they entered, the council members inhaled deeply, their brows furrowing in confusion. They scented Cashin, power, mahogany, winter king. They scented nothing from Ilara, a void. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Boren stood immediately. "You see, a blank, a null. There is no bond sent because there is no bond. This is a farce." The king, in his loneliness, has convinced himself of a fairy tale and broken sacred law to pursue it. The head of the council, an ancient wolf named Thorn with eyes like marble, spoke. "King Cashin, the mate bond is confirmed by a unique synergistic scent, recognizable to both parties and to surrounding alphas. We detect no such synergy. We detect nothing from the female. Present your proof or stand down." All eyes turned to Cashin. He didn't look at the council. He looked at Ilara, giving a slight nod. Then he closed his eyes, and he let his control slip, not his anger but his hearing. He opened the floodgates of his curse, allowing the full, terrifying cacophony of the world to rush in, the heartbeat of every wolf in the amphitheater, the rustle of a mouse a mile away, the sap moving in the trees, the dizzying, maddening symphony of life. A pained grunt escaped him, and a trickle of blood ran from his left ear. The council stared, bewildered. Then Cashin reached for Ilara's hand. The moment their skin touched, his expression transformed. The pain vanished, replaced by utter serenity. The blood stopped. He opened his eyes, clear and focused. "The proof," Cashin said, his voice ringing in the silent arena, "is not in what you can smell. It is in what I can hear. My entire life I have heard everything. It has been a torment. With her I hear only us. She is my silence. She is my peace. She is the balance to my curse. That is our bond." To the council. but do not rely on my word, rely on your own senses. Breathe deeply, not for scent. Listen. The ancient alphas, skeptical, complied. At first they heard nothing unusual, then one by one their eyes widened. In the absolute quiet of the stone chamber against the backdrop of wind and distant forest, two heartbeats were audible, not just audible, they were dominant, and they were perfectly, impossibly synchronized. Thump, 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 a flawless living rhythm. Thorn, the head counselor, stood slowly. He stepped down from his dais and approached them. He ignored Cashen, his milky eyes fixed on Alara. He leaned close not to smell but to listen to her chest. He stayed there for a full minute, his ancient face unreadable. When he straightened, a tear traced a path through his beard. By the goddess, he whispered. It is true, a bond beyond scent, a bond of resonance, Boren erupted. This is trickery, some auditory manipulation. The law states scent. Thorn turned on him, his aura flaring with sudden, terrifying wrath. The law serves the truth of the bond, Boren, not the other way around. We have witnessed a miracle and you would call it a defect. It was then that Cashen played his final card. He nodded to Lyra, who stepped forward and presented the council with the dossier from Ren, the research on Alara's mother, the hired assassination, the theory of evolutionary mutation. She was not hunted because she was worthless, Cashen declared, his voice cutting through Boren's sputtering protests. She was hunted because she is the future, and Boren of Ironwood knew it. He kept her hidden, used her, and when she slipped his grasp, he tried to have her killed on that glacier to protect his outdated power. The revelation was a bomb. The council's attention swung from the miracle of the bond to the crime of its suppression. Boren, seeing his alliance crumbling, his plot exposed, made a final, desperate move. He shifted, a massive tawny wolf, and launched himself not at Cashen, but at Alara, aiming to destroy the evidence of his failure. He never reached her. Thorn, the centuries-old council head, moved with speed that belied his age. He intercepted Boren mid-leap, his jaws closing on the Ironwood Alpha's throat with a final, sickening crunch. The law had been served. The conclave was over. The council recognized Alara not just as Cashen's mate, but as a queen of a new line. Her scentlessness was reclassified not as anosmia lupus, but as resonant silence, a rare and sacred trait. But as Cashen and Alara left the amphitheater, victorious, a new message arrived via secured runner. It was from Cashen's intelligence network. The fallout had already begun. Boren's planned alliance with the Silver Fang Pack had been on the verge of signature. With Boren dead and disgraced, Silver Fang's alpha, a cunning and resentful wolf named Vorgen, saw his own ambitions collapse, and he blamed not the council, but Cashen and his new strange queen. Furthermore, the public revelation of a scentless queen created panic in traditionalist packs. Rumors swirled. Was she even a wolf? Was this a ploy by Cashen to usurp the natural order? Whispers of rebellion, once isolated, began to coalesce. Vorgen of Silver Fang was quietly uniting these fearful traditionalists. They weren't attacking yet. They were gathering. Cashen had won the battle of law, but he had inadvertently started a war of ideology. And this war would not be fought in a council chamber. It would be fought across every territory, every pack, and it would question the very soul of their kind. Alara looked at the worried faces of Cashen's advisors as they boarded the plane home. She had found her mate, her place, her truth. But in doing so, she had shattered the world that rejected her. And now, they would have to rule the pieces. The war of ideology did not begin with armies. It began with whispers. In the weeks following the council's decree, Cashen and Alara returned to a kingdom divided. Loyalists saw them as visionary monarchs ushering in a new age. Traditionalists, stirred by Vorgen of Silver Fang, saw them as dangerous radicals dismantling the pillars of their identity. The first battlefield was information. Vorgen's network spread propaganda. The scentless queen was a human experiment, a witch who had ensnared the king with magic, a harbinger of a silent, emotionless future. Cashen's response was unconventional. He didn't suppress the rumors. He invited them into the light. He announced a grand moot, a traditional gathering open to every pack, where questions could be asked directly. It was a colossal risk. Alara would have to stand before thousands of skeptical, even hostile wolves and be their queen. Her training intensified, but not in protocol, in strength. Lyra the Beta became her personal trainer, not in combat, but in aura projection. They need to feel you, Lyra insisted. Since they can't smell you, you must make your presence undeniable in other ways. Confidence, voice, truth. Meanwhile, Cashen dealt with the practical fallout of Boren's death. The Ironwood Pack was leaderless, its territory in chaos. Kale, now a broken figure stripped of status, was brought before Cashen. He expected execution. Instead, Cashen offered him a choice. You can cling to the old world that told you your worth came from your bloodline and left you empty, Cashen said, his tone devoid of malice. Or you can help build the new one, you know, the Ironwood Wolves. You can lead them, not as an alpha by birth, but as a steward under the crown, helping them transition. It was a masterstroke. By sparing Kale and offering him purpose, Cashen severed the head of the potential rebellion within Ironwood. A vengeful heir would have been a martyr. A contrite steward became a symbol of reconciliation. Kale, humbled and shocked, accepted. The day of the Grand Moot arrived. Tens of thousands of wolves gathered in the vast valley below Obsidian Peak. The air was thick with a million conflicting scents: anxiety, curiosity, aggression. Ilara stood at the edge of a natural stone dais, looking down at the sea of faces. She felt the weight of their gaze, a physical pressure. Cashen stood beside her, a solid, silent pillar of support. He did not speak first. This was her trial. Vorjan, from his position among the Silver Fang contingent, stepped forward, his voice amplified by the natural acoustics. We are here to see this miracle. We are told scent is irrelevant. We are told to ignore the very essence of what we are. So Queen Ilara, prove it, speak to us, make us believe. A hush fell. Ilara closed her eyes for a moment, finding the quiet within herself. When she opened them, she did not address Vorjan. She addressed the crowd. Her voice, clear and carrying, rang out without amplification. For 22 years, you have lived in a world of scent. You have trusted it to tell you who is friend, who is foe, who is family, who is mate. I have lived in a world of silence. I learned to see what you smell. I learned to hear the truth in a voice when a scent could be masked. I learned that a heart can lie, but a heartbeat rarely does. She paused, letting her words settle. You fear what I represent because you cannot categorize me. I am a question to your answers, but I am not here to destroy your world. I am here to ask you to expand it. She then did something no one expected. She stepped down from the dais and walked into the crowd. Gasps followed her. She moved toward a group of older wolves from a traditionalist pack, their scents radiating deep suspicion. She stopped before their elder. You, she said softly, you grieve. Not just for the old ways, for a son. You lost him to a border skirmish last autumn. Your scent screams it, though you wear a stoic face. The elder wolf stared, his jaw slack. How could she know? She had never met him. I see it in the set of your shoulders, Ilara continued, her voice gentle, in the way you avoid the eyes of the young warriors. My silence lets me see your pain, not just smell its echo. I am sorry for your loss. The old wolf's eyes filled with tears. He bowed his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. She moved on, pointing out a young female hiding a pregnancy, a beta nursing a secret ambition to lead, a cook whose food carried the subtle, loving signature of a hidden talent. She read their stories in their micro-expressions, their withheld breaths, the cadence of their pulses. She was not using magic. She was using the skill she had honed in solitude, profound observation. She was showing them that her silence was not an absence, but a different kind of sight. By the time she returned to the dais, the mood in the valley had shifted from hostility to awe. Vorjan, sensing the turning tide, made his last, desperate play. A pretty parlor trick, he shouted. Reading body language, this does not prove a mate bond. This does not prove you are one of us. If you are truly his mate, truly a queen, command him. Make the Alpha King kneel. It was a blatant provocation meant to undermine Cashen's authority. A king does not kneel. The crowd tensed. Ilara looked at Cashen. A silent communication passed between them. Then she turned back to Vorjan, a small, sad smile on her lips. You misunderstand everything, she said, her voice carrying a new, regal steel. I do not command him. We are in balance. He is my silence. I am his sound. You ask for a display of power? Very well. She turned to the crowd. First act as your recognized queen is this. The practice of forced mating for political alliance is hereby abolished across all territories under the crown. The right to choose one's partner, to wait for a resonant bond, whether it comes by scent or by sound or by something we do not yet understand, is now law. The announcement was revolutionary. It directly attacked the foundation of Vorjan's power, his planned web of political marriages. Before Vorjan could explode, Cashen spoke for the first time. And my first act in support of my queen's law is this. The Silver Fang Pack is hereby cut off from all northern trade routes until Alpha Vorjan swears fealty to the crown and its new laws. Vorjan, trapped and publicly humiliated, shifted into his wolf form with a roar of fury, signaling his warriors to attack. But they did not move. The Silver Fang wolves looked at their alpha, then at the united front of Cashin and Ilara, then at the vast crowd that was now murmuring in support of the new decree. Vorjan had overplayed his hand. His own beta stepped forward, placing a warning hand on Vorjan's shoulder. Alpha, no, the fight is over, we have lost. The rebellion crumbled not in blood, but in a sigh of collective realization. Vorjan was taken into custody by the council's enforcers who had been observing. The Grand Moot ended not with a battle, but with the birth of a new social contract. In the months that followed, the changes were profound but gradual. Kale proved a surprisingly effective steward, helping integrate the Ironwood Wolves into the broader kingdom. Ilara established a new academy, not just for combat, but for what she called resonance skills, deep listening, observational deduction, and control of one's own biological signatures. It was initially met with skepticism, but soon, offspring from unions that would have been considered weak due to faint sense began to excel there. A new metric of strength emerged. The final, surprising detail came from the archives. While cataloging her mother's recovered research, Ilara found a hidden footnote. The mutation for resonant silence wasn't entirely random. It was triggered by extreme environmental stress on the mother during pregnancy. Her mother had been caught in a massive forest fire, surrounded by overwhelming, toxic smoke that blinded the olfactory sense. The body in crisis had adapted, redirecting neural pathways in the fetus from scent processing to other sensory enhancements. Ilara was not a genetic fluke. She was an adaptation, and the research suggested that as the human world created more sensory pollution, more such adaptations would likely occur. She was indeed the first, but not the last. This revelation was quietly shared with the council, who now saw her not as a miracle, but as a necessary evolution, a safeguard for their species' future. 1 year after the glacier, Cashin and Ilara stood on the same peak where he had first heard her heart. The kingdom was at peace, the new laws taking root. Ilara leaned against him, his arm around her. The world was still beautifully, wonderfully quiet for him. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The noise?" He shook his head, kissing her temple. "I have everything I need to hear right here." Below them, in the moonlit valley, the sounds of a thriving pack rose, not the old, rigid songs, but a new, more complex harmony. The ghost had found her king. The king had found his silence, and together they had taught an entire world to listen. Ilara and Cashin's story is more than a fairy tale. It is a case study in how societies define what is normal, what is valuable, and what is real. For generations, the werewolf world operated on a simple sensory truth: you are what you smell like. Your mate is who you smell like. Ilara, the scentless ghost, shattered that truth not by overpowering it, but by revealing its limitations. She proved that the deepest bonds can exist in the silence between heartbeats, in the quiet observation of truth, in a resonance that bypasses the obvious to touch the essential. Her journey forces an uncomfortable question: how many of our own real-world systems are built on a single, narrow metric of value? We judge intelligence by test scores, success by wealth, health by appearance, connection by loudness. What brilliant minds, what profound connections, what essential adaptations are we overlooking because they operate on a different frequency? The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf alive, was being slowly driven mad by his greatest gift until he found the one person whose very existence provided the relief he needed. His strength was incomplete without her silence. Her weakness was the key to his sanity. The revolution they led wasn't a war of conquest, it was a war of categorization. They expanded the definition of what it means to be a wolf, what it means to be strong, what it means to be mated. In doing so, they didn't weaken their world, they future-proofed it. By embracing the anomaly, they ensured their species' resilience. The scentless girl was not a glitch in the system, she was the system updating. So the next time you encounter something or someone that doesn't fit the established pattern, that operates in silence instead of noise, that offers a different kind of sense, consider this: you might not be looking at a broken thing, you might be looking at the next step. The ghost in the machine might just be its salvation. If you were captivated by this story of a love that defied biology and a strength born from perceived weakness, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button. It lets us know which deep dives into fictional worlds resonate with you. Share this with someone who loves a tale where the underdog doesn't just win, but changes the rules of the game entirely. And subscribe to the channel, hitting that notification bell so you never miss our next exploration into the lore, the psychology, and the stunning narratives hidden inside your favorite stories. Let us know in the comments, what perceived weakness do you think could be a hidden strength? We read every single one. Until next time, keep listening for the heartbeat in the silence.